All right. Hey everybody. I'm Scott Delaney. I direct the garden here and do other things. So we're going to talk today about our water situation, organic lawn care, and managing your rainwater. First up to bat is Todd, Professor Todd Crail. This is a lot of people get. So if you have any questions about why you're here, what you're doing here, come and ask me, and I'd be happy to give you a tour around the garden afterwards, show you what's going on, what we have going on in the back. If you want to pet a chicken, you're in luck, you come to the right place. All right, without further ado, Todd,
All right, that's better. Okay, hi, I'm Todd. I'm a lecturer in the Environmental Science Department at the University of Toledo. And I've been doing a lot of work with native plants, and I've gotten interested in the food as well. And what they asked me to do was come and talk about what we're doing at our little piece of the earth down in the south end that we call the Meadow House Farm and Preserve. And I'll describe all this to you. So the Meadow House, just to talk about that, it's called a lustron. It was known as Tomorrow's Home. This company catastrophically failed in the early 50s. There's about 2,500 of them around, so there's some historic value. This is an ad from the time. I was a homemaker this fall. It was kind of fun. I got to stay home with my daughter. But a small house, regular sized lot, shared driveway, fences as a schematic of the house. Here's the house portion, the garage, and the driveway. And a lot of, well, all of this used to just be turf grass or invasive shrubs. And I'll show that to you. Now we have over 140 plant species that are native to Lucas County in our little lot here. Some of them have conservation listings in the state. We also have these raised beds where we're growing tomatoes, cukes, kale. I don't know why everybody doesn't have a 4x4 of kale in their yard. It grows in anything, and you can just walk out and browse on it all evening. Lettuce, chard. So kind of, oops, I gotta use this button. And then specialty things that we want to have. So basics and specialties, and then we leave the rest of it to the professional growers. Right? We can go down to the farmer's market and buy it from people who are doing this. So this is very much a hobby for us and supplementary, but that is that much less that has to come from somewhere else. We also have a chicken coop that we've got 5 chickens in. And that has become kind of a focal point in our backyard. When people come over, their kids want to see the chickens, etc. And we are in Toledo, and I think we are within the law. We'll see what plays out through time with the city council going back and forth. But it didn't always look like that. So here's the lustron. Here's our burning bush. Necessary burning bush and yew at the front door. It's all grass, it's all mowed, and now we've kind of transformed that such that we've got these native plants, we have our raised beds, we have our chickens, and we still do have lawn. That is very important, and I'll show you that here in a second. Okay? This is looking back into the yard. It's predominantly exotic or weedy natives. Very little life going on in here. When you don't see insects on plants, that's a problem. And I'll show you what insects on plants looks like here in a second. Our cultural zeitgeist of the day is that bugs are bad, and I would argue it's the opposite. When you don't see bugs, that's bad. And so we've now transformed transformed this into this. And when you start thinking about, and this is, you can see a lot of water in here. This was last June when it rained for forever, and of course that was the day that we had an open house for our garden on the Toledo Naturalist garden tour. But it worked out just fine. And here we see we have provisioning services in our yard. We have food production here, we have food production here. We have food for our pollinators that we need to pollinate our plants that they're able to eat all year round. One of the problems that we face with pollinators is that we need them for a couple weeks out of the year, and then it's like, yeah, go figure it out the rest of the year. It's, I think, an unreasonable expectation. We have fertilizer that we can use for our food from the chickens as well. There's a flow of fertilizer that's going through the soil out into the yard, so we're not having to manufacture fertilizer for that. We also have a dog that makes us crazy. Well, that's just going to drive me crazy. All right. Also, shelter for the insects. A lot of the bees, the tendency is, well, it's fall, I'm going to cut all this stuff down because it's winter and I don't want to look at it anymore. The bees are living in the stems of those plants. The native bees are, and so that's an important part of their ecology. And also some regulating services. All this water gets stored in the ground on site. When it's drought, I don't have to water my grass because there's so much water stored in the ground, and I'll show you that as well. So provisioning services, regulating services, a lot of ecosystem services, and there's still space for the human community. All right, we can still get 40 people on our backyard. The kids are playing with the chickens. People are sitting around the campfire, setting up on the patio, talking, communicating, and so forth. So it's not a zero-sum game where it's winner take all. It's, if we really want to win, it would be it'd be smart to think that way. How did I get into all this? Well, I'm kind of into fish, and for the people who know me, that they know how understated that is. I'm insane about fish. And I ran into these pretty little fish that live in dirty little streams that you see all over northwest Ohio. All 6 of these fish, they're called darters. They're related to perch and walleye. Live in riffle type environments, different parts of the riffle. That's what I did a whole PhD on, was where these things live. And I thought, when I discovered these things, I said, I have to protect these. All right? I didn't care much about my species, I cared about other species. And I thought that would sell pretty well, and I've come to disagree with myself on that. I think it's important to talk about, in particular, that they're affected by nutrients, they're affected by sediment, and they're affected by heat. And that is something that's really come into play in this scenario. All right? So now our species is being affected by the same problems that I saw these species being affected by with the algal blooms. And when we couldn't drink our water in 2014, we learned that we needed to do something different, right? Except 2015 was the biggest bloom on record. We learned nothing. We changed nothing. And that's frustrating, all right? It was the most intense. It's a result of nutrients coming from all over on the landscape, and I'll give you the breakdown of where those things are coming from and the different processes that contribute to it. In the lake, phosphorus is the predominant reason. It's a phosphorus limited system. In the ocean, it's a nitrogen limited system. So nitrogen is also an issue, and these are the 2 broad macronutrients that we're applying to optimize our production of food and so forth. All right? And one of the things that's interesting about the phosphorus and nitrogen relationship, we know this in 2011, which was formerly the biggest bloom on record, was that in a phosphorus limited system, it would continue to bloom as much as possible with as much phosphorus that it had. The thing of it is that it ran out of nitrogen. There was still phosphorus available in the lake that year, and to turn the 11th largest body of water by surface area in the world from a phosphorus limited system to a nitrogen limited system is insane. That is insane, and we need to understand what that means about what we're doing. And also, how water flows across the landscape. If we treated our channels as rivers, a lot of this problem would go away, but we want the water gone now. So we want it gone in the cheapest way possible, and those are the issues that we want. We want our food cheap, we want our gas cheap, we want our drainage cheap, we want our sewage cheap. We want to spend as little money on those things as possible, and this is the result. It just happens to accumulate all at Maumee Bay and in the Western Basin. Most of us agree we have another problem. The planet is warming up. 2015 was the warmest year on record. You can see that the other warm years are in recent time. We're looking at a 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit above the average. This is the global average, which is approaching 1 degree Celsius. And a lot of the talks that you hear on climate are looking at maintaining at 2 degrees Celsius. We're already seeing the events. So weather, when I talk about climate and weather to my students, climate is like your personality, your weather is like the mood, your mood. All right, is a good way to think about how that works and the difference. But for example, in December, we had all the heat bring the moisture out from the El Nino in the Pacific, and we had flooding that went all the way across the United States. But what was particularly interesting about this storm was it was so powerful that it powered its way all the way across the continent. It joined with another storm that was out in the Atlantic. It joined with a remnant storm that was hanging out over Europe, and it pushed that air mass. It had enough energy to shove itself into the polar air mass and have the temperature at the North Pole on December 30th be above freezing. That's insane. And I think we're only just starting to see what this is doing, all right? And so the green bands are, the dark green here is like 50, it was 50 in northern Norway on that day. All right, that is insane, absolutely insane. Also the Hadley cells, and I'm not going to get into that, but the circulation systems around the planet are strengthening. So the wet areas are getting too wet, the dry areas are getting too dry. And you're already seeing many armed conflicts across Africa and Central Asia going right along. There's a climate band that it just follows right along, and it's because the water is becoming scarce. And so a lot of these bad predictions that we have about what's to come are already starting to manifest. We have another emerging problem. Our pollinator numbers are crashing. We're already driving bees around to pollinate our food. In China, they're hand pollinating because they have crashed their numbers. So the reasons, it's demand. We demand a lot from our landscapes. We're using technology. We want to control some bugs, but these technologies are not selective in which bugs they control. We're manipulating more area. The patches in between that the insects will use for their ecological niche are smaller, and the technologies are going across those and wiping out those insects. And so a lot of it comes down to culture, back to the point of wanting everything as cheap as possible. Right? And so it may be the most efficient way, but when you measure the negative externalities of those processes, it may not be that efficient. Most of us are culpable. All right, so this is a graphic that National Geographic put out last year, or 2 years ago. And what it shows you, the dark purples are for feed and fuel. So this is what we're growing out there. The greens are actual food. And so you'll see that we have 3 food centers in most of the United States. What we're growing out there is not a food that you can eat. It's not food as it stands. It's a raw material for other processes. And that may be something like growing meat, and I am a meat eater. I will always be a meat eater. It will have to be pretty dire for me to not want to eat meat, right? I would never elect to be a vegetarian. I thank those of you who are. You offset my footprint, thank you. All right, yes, I'm not giving up the bacon. All right, but that's something that we don't understand. A lot of people don't understand is all of this agriculture that we see around us is just a raw material. It might as well be petroleum. All right. Oh, it is petroleum, and I'll tell you about that. Now we're not even growing food; we're growing gasoline, and at about a 6% return, and that's over the fuel used to produce it, and that's not weighing all the negative externalities that are going into the environment, such as I can't drink my water. Right? So water is probably a basic human right. Eating meat is probably not a basic human right. And that's an important point to make. So let's look at the breakdown of this. And what we were going to talk about today was what to do with our lawns. And that is 9% of the phosphorus contribution into the lake. Sewage, everybody poops, all right? You might have read the book to your kids, right? It's a book. What do we do with that? Again, we can spend more money to contain that amount, process it better so that there's less effluent coming from those processes. But just from in town, you're basically looking at 35% of the phosphorus that's contributed. So a third of it is coming from the cities. So don't go ready to tar and feather the farmers, all right? Because who are they growing for? They're only doing what we ask them to do. And the fact that they have been willing to come to the table and say, what can we do to change, expresses the integrity of these people. They're just trying to make a living. A conventional farmer isn't out to kill the planet. And this is something that we really need to understand. And so there is effluent from that process to do it as efficiently as we've set up. And then it comes around and it goes back to meat, right? And to go a little further with that, this is how we make nitrogen that we apply to a field. Pretty convoluted, right? It comes from petroleum, and it takes lots of energy at each of these different points to get that liquid nitrogen that we want. This is 4% of our national energy footprint is just to make nitrogen. Now, if you're using that to feed more people, that's probably a good use of it, okay? But you are releasing carbon dioxide from this process, both from the process and from heating the process, and so that it contributes to our carbon footprint and so forth. All right, so really what it comes down to, the biggest bang for the buck, if you are concerned about sustainability, and this is always my thing, if you are concerned with that type of thing, reducing your meat consumption is really the biggest change you can make to slow these processes down. And I didn't say don't eat meat, so my wife likes to do the vegan before 6. Mark Bittman's a food critic, well, was a food critic, he left, it's so sad. I don't know what he's doing now, but anyway, he's talking about it's a change in our culture. It's a change in thinking. Do I need to eat meat at lunch? You know, that's a good question. Meatless Mondays, or just reducing the portion, or switching to another type of meat. If you switch to farmed catfish, I'm big on farmed catfish. I love farmed catfish, right? Because the conversion ratio for a cold-blooded animal versus a warm-blooded animal is much higher. You put 10 pounds in, you get 7 to 8 pounds out of catfish. You do that with a cow, you get 1 pound of cow. All right, so you can offset within internally and still be eating that protein resource. All right, so next in line, let's go back to that 9% that we were talking about. And hopefully this feels more positive the whole rest of the way. Okay, so let's go back to the good old meadow house, chicken coops and all that. Merits and native plants. So remember, I got into this because I was into fish, but then I also am into flowers and I like all this biodiversity. That's what trips my trigger. All right, so I came in this the other way. Most people are probably going to come in this from a water standpoint or from a food standpoint, and that'd be their interest. But this is what I love about it. You don't have to use fertilizer. In fact, we have too much fertilizer on the ground already. They do too well. Reducing your fertilizer is one of the challenges that you'll have to, or reducing your nutrients is one of the challenges that you'll have in doing native plant gardening. There are more nutrients on the surface of the planet than there have ever been. Ever. All right? And so a lot of the things that grew here, you know, don't have to water it. Why? Because they're accustomed to the climate. They're also a pollinator food. All right? So tomatoes in my yard are a weed. They're so fecund because they get visited so much by all these native bees that I have that they go everywhere. My neighbors get run over with cherry tomatoes. Literally, two houses down. That I don't know if mice or voles or something are carrying the seeds. Somebody's moving them around and everyone's like, who's growing these tomatoes? All right, they're a terrible weed. And I'll show you why. We're going to switch over to a video. This is what life looks like. So this is wild bergamot. You can make a tea out of this, by the way. All right. But I want you to see how many bugs are up in this.
It's not the wind blowing enough.
That is, no, it might not be the wind. And when you walk by a conventional garden, you don't see this. All right, this is life happening. I always freak everybody out because I do my bee petting trick. I walk up to the bumblebee and you can pet them. They're so drunk on nectar they don't even care that you're there. And everyone's like, wow, you know. Really freaked my kids out at Scott. They just didn't know what to make of that. Bees were something to be afraid of. And you know, if I would go into anaphylaxis, if I got stung, that'd be a problem too. So, you know, at doorways, this might not be the best idea. Right? And we're going to talk all about that. Okay, so let's switch back over, Sean. So this is life happening. Alright, so pollinator food and then birds. Start attracting the birds. The birds are eating the bugs. The birds are also eating the seeds all winter long. I have juncos come in like crazy. I don't put out bird food. I already have it there. Really see it when it snows heavy because a lot of this stuff will be up above the ground. And so those are some of the things that we'll see. They also have these huge root systems. Okay, so this is an illustration of some different native plants and their root systems. Here's Kentucky bluegrass. All right, the emerald asphalt, as I like to call it. All right, it's a little bit higher in biodiversity than that parking lot. And it may be necessary, okay, and we're going to talk about that. But in these cases, you've got all these roots going down, storing carbon under the ground, and it happens fast.
You're saying that that's a Kentucky bluegrass root system?
This is the root system.
And what is that down?
2 inches. And prairie dock have broken shovels off trying to transplant. This is herbaceous plant, it's not even a shrub. Alright, so they're drilling down in. When they do that, they're storing carbon, so a lot of these grasses send these roots down every year. And they build soil fertility by putting their roots down under the ground. Iowa, eastern Kansas, the tall grass prairie region, Illinois. Some of the richness there is because the soils are young. Same thing here. We have all this ground up rock flour. But it's also old sunlight that has been converted into nutrients that was carbon and nitrogen that was fixed by those plants down in the soil through these processes. Right? And a prairie is a forest turned upside down in terms of its carbon. So when you think about a woods, you see a lot of carbon on the surface, And there is a fair amount under the ground, but it's not as much as it is above ground. Prairie is flipped. And it happens rapidly, which is good news for, we don't have to wait for the woods to come back, right? We can build biodiversity as we go. Water infiltration is a big issue, all right? So a lot of these compacted soils have been driven on by heavy machinery. Water can't get down into it, and it flashes off. It's just like pavement. Same thing with the bluegrass. There's very weak infiltration, and this is why you end up having to water the lawn because it's not storing as much water. After you get an inch, inch and a half of rain, it's already saturated, and the remaining amounts will just flow off, right? And I'll show you how much. So this is that rainstorm. This was at 2 p.m. By 6:30 p.m., it had already gone down to this little rain garden that I had just started. So all this water down in the ground, gone, away from everything else. And without any plants in here, by the next day, all the water was gone from that rain garden. That was just bare dirt. So there are effects that are happening from the surrounding area, right? We're building fertility all the way around that's fertilizing this needy grass that we have out in the middle, right? And we're also giving it water.
Now your rain garden, that's on the backside of the chicken coop?
That's on the backside of the chicken coop here, yep. So I put this in right here, one to capture that water. I was just letting it run out into that garden. But I did this to drop base level for the water that was getting spilled in my chicken coop, and it's keeping my chicken coop ground way drier. So it essentially created a wetland below where the chicken coop is, so the water could flow away from there. And that really helped to dry that out. And I wasn't getting the wet straw. We were getting wet straw. We were seeing foot problems with the chickens.
Once it's in the ground, it moves out into the lawn there.
That's right.
From that particular point, it spreads out.
So you can think about, yeah, so the water is going to get distributed all through the soil. This is a pervious pavement here. It's not for everybody. I'll show you it in a little bit better detail. It's just crushed stone, but it's very thirsty too. And so that water is all getting stored in the ground lower. Some of it's actually percolating through the ground and then coming out in springs over at Delaware Park, for example. That was the natural process that would have happened. But we've put in so much pervious pavement and rapid, I'm capturing my water footprint. This is another way to think about it. Yeah. Okay. And you can do this with rain barrels too. You'll see that here in a second. They're totally ugly, right? All these weeds. These are all general flowers. You grow these in any soils in Lucas County around your house. The bugs will flock to them and so forth. The bloodroot's blooming right now in my yard. All right, so I have to wait for the crocus to come up. Whoop-de-doo. I was complaining about this on Facebook. I don't care about your crocus. You know, the different things that look more familiar. Black-eyed Susans. This is the native wild type. The cultivars that we usually buy at the store. A lot of the production's been put into, and it's a different species than this one, the wild species. You should see the wild type of that. I should get an orange cone flower photo. But we're trading nutrition for blooms. All right, we've traded nutrition, the same thing with corn. We've changed the amount of protein that's in the germ and turned it into a very carbohydrate-rich kernel. We've decreased the amount of protein that's stored in that individual kernel. That's some of the selection that's going on. Same thing with the black-eyed Susans. The wild type has much more nutritious food for both in terms of the pollen and in terms of the seed output. All right, so when we do these things, we're basically creating McDonald's food. Yeah, you can live on it, but I don't suggest you do it. All right, so we have all these that we can use, and the good news is we have a lot to choose from. There's 1,700 species of plants native to Ohio, and 1,300 of them occur in Lucas County. We have more rare numbers of plants in Lucas County than any other county in the state. Hocking, suck eggs, we don't care. Yes, your landscape is pretty, but we've got a lot. We have a lot to choose from. And so the question then becomes what's right for your yard. And we're not going to get into fine details with that. I'm going to try to stay pretty macro. Maybe we can do something that's more focused on what are the right plants. But in seeing this, and I put together a list very easy of things to look for at some of these places that are selling them. Again, you can do these plants in any yard, any soils in Lucas County. So what I like to think about is the right plant for the right place, right? When we don't do one or the other, if we do the wrong plant, it either looks bad or dies, and the place has a lot to do with it, okay? And so when we're thinking about the right place, and I've got this house and I want to take all this out and do whatever, this is what the plant really cares about. It cares about the amount of sunlight, it cares about the type of soil, which relates to the amount of moisture and the nutrients that are available to it. And usually when we think about nutrients, we think about more is better. We like a soil that we grow tomatoes in. That's what we have in our head as good soil. The natives see it the opposite way. They want the bad soil. And they will build the fertility in that soil, and then a normal successional process will take place after that. But at any rate, you can take these and you think about this as a model in space, and you pull things around different ways. I'm going to pull out on sunlight and make it more sunny. There are certain plants that favor that, or I'm going to pull it more this way where it's more nutrient rich, and there's going to be certain species that are out there, right? So this is one way to think about that. And most of us have fairly general conditions in our yard. We may have sand, we may have clay, or most of us have a sandy loam. It's a mixture, unless you're on the other side of the river, and then I don't even know what you call that over there. It's some hardcore stuff. All right, but there are plants that are suited to those conditions, regardless of how bad you might think they are. In fact, bad might actually be easier for you to do a native installation. But right place, this is where we always get in trouble. This is where we get, and I'm going to grade myself on 4 different gardens, and we're going to use that to illustrate that. The Wild Ones, which is a group that you might want to get interested into if this native plant stuff sounds appealing to you, and I'll describe that more at the end. But one of their members has an acronym, which is BRASH, and it's a very instructive way to think about how to go about not just native plant gardening, but also urban agriculture. Because if I stick my poopy squawky chickens right up in your face, or if I haul in 6 tons of manure and here, just deal with it because I'm doing the right thing, you may be doing the right thing, but you are not selling this very well. And so the acronym is BORDERS. You need something that leads up to it. It has to look purposeful. If you make a hedge or you shove something up against someone else, you might as well just put a middle finger on it, and that's really important. You need to recognize the rights of others. They can disagree with you, okay? Anyone being sanctimonious about something is not going to earn the general populace's support for what they're doing. Advertise. Tell people what it is. What am I doing here? I've got a friend in Ann Arbor who regularly burns his yard in downtown Ann Arbor. It's a block party. Every year he does it. He's managed to gain everyone, and they've changed weed laws in Ann Arbor to say, you know what, we do need more of these plants. And some of the things that are scary, like I'm going to light this on fire, can even become part of that changing culture, because it does benefit some of the diversity that's in there. Start small. This is where everybody gets in trouble. I'm going to do this awesome thing. and we get ahead of ourselves. I am most guilty of this. I am most guilty of this. This is where I got myself in trouble. And humanize. Put things that draw people into the garden and help them to understand that the environment is their environment. You know, that's the disconnect. Do you support the environment like it's some other entity and we're completely divorced from it? No, this is our environment. All right, so garden number 1. We're going to grade my gardening 3 times. So you remember this is where that burning bush was. And I'm going to put a little simple rain garden in here. I've got a downspout here. This is all that has to go into a rain garden. People will say, oh, you've got to engineer this and you've got to amend the soils and you've got... No, quit engineering. That's our whole problem. We've tried to engineer everything. Nature's had 4.5 billion years to figure this out. I think it's got it right by now. Our difference is, you know, this is where ego comes in, and I get it. But all you have to do is provide a shallow depression. You can change the moisture level and prevent that water from hitting the driveway and running down and going off into the storm sewer and into one of our respective rivers and carrying anything it comes in contact along with it. All right, so this is a good place. I think I'm doing all right so far. All right, it's pretty cute. You see the water in there. It's raining. Todd's all happy. Erica's all happy. Got a cute little garden. Then it starts getting established. It's getting jungly. Getting real jungly. The phone won't ring for this garden. All right? Now it's got some issues. It's got some issues. So what's my grade on this one? With the brash. I'm giving myself a B-. Okay? Now why? All right? Getting high fives when we're walking up the driveway. It is tall. I like it wild. All right? If you want to try to do any garden where a plant belongs here and a plant belongs here, you can do that and drive yourself nuts. What's nice about these is you can think of them at the community level in association, but you have to pick the right plants, all right? And I'm pushing it. This is going to be a B+ already this year because I took some of the extra stuff. You can't see it with the contrast here, but I've got sunflowers that are going over the top of the roof. And I removed that ironweed from there. Ironweed's a great plant, but it has to have the right place. Up against the house is okay, all right? Up against your sidewalk, not gonna happen. It's gonna flop over, it's gonna be an issue. Now some of the issue here is this tree that was in the front. We've taken that, it's a silver maple, we've taken that out. And so stuff is leaning a little bit extra because it's trying to get to the light early in the season. And then when the sun, and this is what was funny was, this tree was actually stealing heat from our house in the winter and doing absolutely nothing for it in the summer because of the way the sun passed over or the angle that it was coming at. It's actually warmer in our house now that we've removed the tree in the winter, and there's no difference in the summer, all right? And all this green around the house is also cooling the house. All that energy is getting converted into photosynthesis rather than just going into the structure and heating it up. All right? So those are some of the things, and this garden isn't for everybody, okay? But I like it. I like it more wild. I got ahead of myself here. 10 years ago when I put it in, I wasn't as good about this. I was a little bit sanctimonious. It's the right thing. It has all these benefits. You should like it. I'm here to tell you I found a different way around that, okay? So there's that garden. Garden number 2. This is one of my favorite gardens ever. It was awesome. 300 heads of butterfly milkweed. It went through from the end of June until the end of August. It was just a succession of blooms. Monarchs, when we still had them, would show up. This is the look down the driveway, and it would just go through this bloom cycle each year. All right, how did I build it? Because these were specialized plants. Well, I hauled in 9 tons of sand, because these are Oak Openings natives. I wanted to do conservation gardening. I wanted to have these plants at home so I would know when seeds would be ready to be harvested out in the Oak Openings region, all right, which is a sandy thing. It might even be sandy here, I don't know, it's so chewed up with what we've done to it. But anyway, I brought that in, and I created a dune. All right, so this is all sand, and then this is after the initial planting. You seen any issues here? What are my issues?
Just engineered the soil.
Leak on your driveway.
So here's her driveway. She's getting high fives, and she pulled, but they're short. No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That's exactly what I did wrong. I went right up to the property line because she'd gone over the property line, and so screw you. All right. The worst part was she was 72, and now she has 12 inches higher that she has to throw her snow up. Not cool. Not cool. Bringing the sand in isn't a big deal. I'm going to do it again, and I'll do it right this time. Now that we have the maple out, but no, this is a failing garden. And if I hadn't liked it so much, I'd given it an F. All right, so we moved this whole garden over to UT, which is another cool thing about these plants. They love to be kicked around. They don't care. What, you know, if somebody gets mad, I'm just mowing it down. Who cares? The city's actually created more of a problem for themselves out in front of the zoo because they reduced all the competition on the basil rosettes, and that fall sunflower is going to be ridiculous this year. Absolutely ridiculous, and that we can talk about that later if you want. I want to stay out of that minefield for now. But that's one of the things. All right, so this was a failing garden, really cool. 12 state-listed species in it. There was almost 50 species in the garden itself. A high degree of different environmental factors that the plants needed, but it just went against everything. You know, look how angular she is. And now she's getting high fives, and she's as stubborn as I am, and so it failed catastrophically. All right, but here's another one. Here's garden 2.5, so this was another one. We had a strip of soil along this was just stone and, you know, the dyed red mulch and pallet mulch, and it was gross. So we dug all that out and we put the sand in here. And you can't, it's very hard to photograph. This is prickly pear cactus, some butterfly milkweed. We've got sand cherry and sweet fern in this. Again, a lot of those rare plants in Ohio. And monarch seeding on the butterfly milkweed and the baby sleeping next to the sweet fern. And I'll give this one an A-. All right, it was away from everybody else. It wasn't affecting anyone else. And I was still able to accomplish what I was interested in accomplishing. Garden number 3, another recessed garden. You see the problems already?
It's up against the fence.
It's up against the fence. Okay, so that's an issue. That's probably the biggest issue. And here's the hedge growing up. And this is just in June. This would get this tall. It's a wall. And now I am still paying for it because the plants seeded in the yard next to it because they were aggressive. And this guy over next door is like, you know, I was tending my stuff, but it's a rental now. And he's like, oh yeah, I love all your native plant gardens. And what he has turned from a low maintenance garden is a no maintenance garden. And so I have to deal with my own sins coming back to haunt me. And it looks horrible over here because it's just stuff everywhere. There's no purpose to it. This is that pervious pavement. All right, so it's just crushed stone. It is not for everybody. We're gonna build a low deck here so that the water can still flow down into it and be stored, but also get the stones knocked off the shoes, off the dog's feet, because the little stones do come inside. But this is, if you're trying to build a little patio on the cheap for someplace off your back door, this is nice, and it is thirsty. I mean, we just run the drain onto it all winter long. It soaks it all up. It's never wet. It really is thirsty. We do have rain barrels set in place. My parents freaked out during the water crisis, drove to Findlay. I'm like, I have 110 gallons of water behind my house. I boiled it and drank it on purpose. It tasted like roof. It wasn't the best. But on principle, you know. But yeah, this is a bad garden. All right, this is C-. I could control it. I could cut everything, let it grow up to about June, and then cut everything off, and then let it resprout from there. But there's more energy and maintenance that has to go into maintaining it in a way that is recognizing the right of others, is honoring the borders. And some of the trouble I got into was that it was part of all of these garden projects, and so this was the one that I ignored because it wasn't in the front yard. Right? And that goes into start small. Here is the revision. You can see the fence. This is at its peak height. You can see the fence through the whole thing. And then I came up with this idea of building a catwalk along. These are just cedar timbers. It's $30 to build this walkway. This was just scrap that I had from another project, and it's helped to set this off. And you can see that the height is now here. I can talk to my neighbor across the garden. The neighbor can see all of the life that's happening in between us, so forth, so it doesn't become divisive. So I'm giving this one a B+ right now. Here you can see it in, this is in July. We got some Michigan lilies. I'm trying to do some more specialized plants in this particular garden now. All right, last garden. So I've learned some things. All right. I want to put this garden in. I specifically made the mower width all the way around it. Learned something. All right. When I took out the other garden, I did drop the elevation so that water would come off of the pavement, so I'm capturing that water footprint. So one of the things, we always build up borders where water goes, right? If we built them down, we would store all that productivity on site. So back to the way the flows go across the land, and we get worried about taking too much discharge and mosquito. You saw how fast that water disappeared, and that's not long enough for mosquitoes to go through their whole cycle. It's different in wildlands and so forth, but in a normal residential area, it's a little different. I got ahead of myself. What did I do wrong here? So it's recessed. I put a border in. Got a really good border. What did I do wrong?
You went to the curb?
I went all the way to the curb.
You did, didn't you?
I did. And it took me about a year to figure that out. So I stepped it back to here. And I left the swale here of grass. So I dug it in so it's still capturing that water. All right. So you can use the grass as that border. You can use the grass if you maintain contact time with it to get that water into the ground. Some of the same processes that you're trying to do with the rest of it. Oh, and this is really nice grass up here because I've got all this fertility that's happening in the garden that's flowing along with that water. There's extra water getting stored from here, and so on and so forth. And I'm really happy about this garden. You can't really see with the contrast. This is only year number 2 of this garden, and you usually need to give it 3 years. So this is going to be, I'm very happy with this garden. And
Your neighbor is too.
Neighbor is very pleased because now we have a hole to put our snow into rather than a mound to pile it up on.
That's common sense.
this is just common sense, and these are some of the lessons I hope that I can pass along to other people. Yep. So how do you learn the specifics? I'll give you a bunch of general stuff, a lot of general stuff. Green Ribbon Initiative is focused around the oak openings, but those are a lot of general concepts that can be applied. One of the concepts that we don't get is how it's biodiverse in Lucas County. It's crazy. Rain Garden Initiative, some folks from there are going to talk about that. The Wild Ones is a national landscaping organization that uses native plants in their landscapes. There are some plant sales that are coming up. I know they're going to post them on here and on here. Are you guys
You
posting?
can do the sales, but those are on, those three places are really good, and then the Soil and Water District also does one on May
Soil and Water
6th.
would be, yes, sorry, I
think
forgot that.
I think Denise put that on the list.
This is not an exhaustive list. This is what I threw on here at 11:45 last night. Because I have a 10-month-old and I'm learning. All right, there she is.
Aw.
Yeah. All right, and that's really what it comes down to for us.
Thank you very much, Todd.